A lot of guys seem to think that they have to take a girl out to a nice dinner, or they have to do this, or have to
Mm,
do that. Low investment dates tend to be the best, not just because it costs less, but it's just more fun. It's light on both parties, and the women
mhm.
aren't. They don't feel pressured with something. Like if you like go out, and this is one of the things that I was talking to my girlfriend about. When you go out to a very expensive restaurant, sometimes the girls think that there's an expectation that comes along with it, like an expectation for
Okay,
sex. And so by keeping
sure.
it low investment, it's very casual for both of you because really what is a first date? It's just getting to know the other person. So
Yeah.
I'm huge on those types of dates. I don't know what your opinion is on that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And that was kind of a wake up for me as well, realizing that like, dude, like a great date's gonna be just like going to the park and going for a walk, right? Going grab a coffee or something. Ideally, you want to be sitting next to the girl too. Like, I think that's another thing about dates that can be kind of not so great is that like in the movies, right? They're sitting across from each other. There's no ability to touch the other person. It's like almost like an interview. And I found like you want to be like able to like interact with the girl physically, right? So put your legs can touch, you can, touch her arm here or there or something. But again, when you're sitting across from her, it's just like interview mode. And that's not gonna elicit spark or anything like that.
Hmm.
Hmm.
One thing that it's interesting you say that of sitting next to. I think that's great because if you're sitting across, that requires a higher level of social calibration. So, like for example,
Okay.
in my last apartment, the way that I had it set up, I would do mostly at-home dates, like so direct to home, and so they would come over, and the way that I had it laid out is essentially it was a very small place, like a studio place, but essentially where I would sit was like facing the bathroom and they would sit like the opposite direction. So we would sit across from each other, and it's just like getting to know each other, talking like this. And then I would do something like get up to go to the bathroom or something, and it led to a great transition where it's like not catching them off guard because like I'm gonna use the restroom, and then just like stopping and it's like you just look too beautiful, and then you go in for a kiss. Like there's certain
Mm,
ways to build tension because I do actually like sitting
sure.
across, but it
Okay.
requires a higher social calibration to be able to make it work. It's much easier if you sit next to because it's more of that you're enjoying the experience together. Let's say.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
there's pros and cons to both, but definitely if
Definitely.
you don't
Yeah.
have the social acumen, sitting across it really causes a separation, and that separation, unless you figure it out, you're never going to recover from it.
Yeah. I mean, you're right too. Like you can start sitting across. Like obviously, I'm not saying like, oh, if you sit across from her by just like coincidence, like the date's over. There's definitely ways to move to switch it up so that at one point you are right next to her. But there's been girls where they didn't want to sit right next to me right away. They did sit
Hmm.
across, and over the night we went to another venue. Then like it's like they were way more open to sitting next to me after we've kind of gotten to know each other. So yeah, it's definitely a social calibration thing, reading the woman you're with and not trying to force it. Really, that's like the most important thing. Like
And
if you're
here's
out there,
here's a
go.
simple one based on what you were saying. Here's a simple one. Let's say you're sitting at the bar, she's sitting in the booth. That's how you guys are kind of set up. And let's say there's games or something playing behind you that you can't see because you're looking at her. And you could just get up and sit next to her and be like, you got a better view than me, and it's not fair.
Oh, I like that.
There you go. What a
Dope.
transition. Like you guys have talked for a little bit, you're developing a little bit of rapport, and then you do something funny like that, and then boom, you're sitting next to each other, and it's there you go. You're breaking the
Totally.
tension.
Or even vice versa. Like I'm like I want to be away from TV when I'm out. So sometimes I'll be like, oh man, I can't stop looking at the TV. I'm just gonna move over here, and boom,
Hmm.
just like that. Yep.
There's so many
Uh,
ways you can do it.
so
So many
many
ways
ways.
you can do it. Hmm.
And that's like the best part about dating is you get to be creative and find your own flow. Like we are obviously giving advice. Tons of guys on the internet are giving you advice, but what I found most important is I have to create it for my own self. And Hudson and you and I were talking about this yesterday. Like at some point you were telling me you just gotta be yourself and just be you, period. And
Yeah. Being
that's when stuff will
authentic
really start to flow.
being authentic is number one. We were talking about it yesterday on how like with mode one fits my personality, whereas mode one may not fit your personality. So instead of trying
Definitely.
to fit your personality into a specific mold, how about you just live your own personality? And you
Yeah,
find that once you really truly live your authentic self, I know that sounds so cheesy, but it's the truth. As soon as you live your authentic self, you have more fun and you have more success.
absolutely. And sometimes going off that, a really important thing is sometimes the authentic self isn't quite there yet. And that's something that I think that's where that phrase "be your authentic self" gets kind of misconstrued, because it's like, okay, example, I'm 400 pounds and I play video games all day, but I'm being my authentic self. Why am I not getting women? It's like, okay, you might need to change your authentic self to fit a little bit, right? But at the end of the day, your personality is always going to come through. And I want to touch another point about the dating, or the first topic you talked about, that you don't need a fancy date. Something that I've kind of come to see as well is that oftentimes if you go on a first date and you have it be a big extravagant dinner, it's kind of like it's a low key trying to flex, right? And like you said, it can add some pressure. And I see it kind of like simping, right? It's like I'm going to pay for your affection instead of just knowing that, okay, I'm enough being just by myself wherever the hell we are. We're gonna have a great time. We don't need money. We don't need fancy dinner, steak, lobster, etc. To have that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also, depending on what type of lifestyle you live, if you're taking her out on a very fancy dinner or a very expensive time, and you don't typically do that, you're being inauthentic because you're presenting yourself as, yes, this is what I'm used to and this is what I do. And then who knows, maybe she has an expectation of that for most of the relationship, where most of the times
Mm,
you'd rather just go to like a local pub, like with friends or something. Like you're used to just doing pub food, but you're setting an expectation different than how you actually live your life.
right. You're like, oh fuck, I gotta do lobster again this week. God damn it. Shoot
Mm-hmm.
yourself in the foot. I opened another credit card so I can take my girl out for a date. It's like, no, we don't want to be doing
Don't
that.
do not do that. Do not do
No,
that.
no, no. Big red flag.